Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's wonderful to see all of you. I want to tell you a quick anecdote. When you first become a rabbi, you don't really have a style of sermon yet. You kind of experiment with different things. And when I was in Las Vegas, I thought it was a really cheesy sermon, and it was about a dog. Okay? And I delivered it, and I was really shocked that afterwards people loved it. And people talked about it and sent me emails, and I thought, this was really cheesy. It was silly. It was about a dog. And I thought, I'll show them really what I can do. And I wrote this theologically, philosophically charged humdinger. And I came the next week, and like Moshe Rabbeinu, I delivered that sermon to people giving very quizzical looks. And afterwards, someone came up to me and they said, your dog's sermon was much better. And I remember I was so upset, and I went into my mentor's office, Felipe Goodman, and I told him, I said, I took a dog sermon and this other thing, and he paused and said in his very thick Mexican accent, I'll never forget this, he said, Jonathan, learn this now, they always love the dog sermon. So, there you go. I don't know what it is about Jews and puppy dogs, but, With that being said, let me give you a brief dog story. This is a true story, and it's about my aunt and uncle's dogs. My aunt and uncle, growing up, my mom's sister and brother-in-law, they never had any kids. They were kind of like, which made them a great aunt and uncle, by the way. They were always the ones to give us the best birthday presents. And they went and got a purebred chow puppy, and they named him Shiloh. He was adorable, and that was their baby. And in the next life, if that's an option, I want to come back as Shiloh. That dog was pampered, had an enormous pillow on the floor. They gave him lunch meat to eat, hand-fed from the table. He had a big backyard to play in. They built him a doghouse inside by the fireplace. This dog had it made. When I was younger, when I got to be, kind of preteen, my aunt and uncle would have us do yard work outside in the Texas heat. And sometimes when we'd go in and out, I would forget to lock their backyard. And when the gate would be open, Shiloh would just take off. And he'd run around the neighborhood, just acting like a complete moron dog. And we'd have to get in my uncle's truck, and we'd have to ride around shouting and track him down, bring him back. It was a whole ordeal every time Shiloh got let out. Well, a couple of years after Shiloh being their only dog, they found another dog who was a stray. I don't know where this dog came from, but it was ugly dog, and it was mean. It was like the total definition of a street dog. And if I had to guess, I think that it had encountered some kids that were mean to it. So this dog hated kids, would growl at us and bark at me and my brothers, did not like kids. Well, they took this dog in off of the streets, and they named her Shelly. And Shelly immediately started getting spoiled too. She landed at the right house. Because after years of living on the streets, she really appreciated a family that loved her. And so after a while, she came around, and she wasn't mean anymore. I guess probably all the lunch meat she was getting. And we finally noticed something. When someone would leave the back gate open, Shiloh, the purebred chow, would escape and run around the neighborhood like a moron. But Shelly, the street dog, saw that open gate and said, I'm not going anywhere. So, at this point, you're wondering what this has to do with the Parshat, Judaism, or Jewishness. Well, stay tuned. Some people, including several biblical scholars or anthropologists, they like to suggest that the events in the book of Exodus didn't actually happen. And they will point to the events in our Parsha, which is Parsha Beshalach, and they'll say something like, it's impossible for the Sea of Reeds to actually part the way the books describe it. Or they'll say, it's impossible for the amount of people to survive in the wilderness. It kind of sounds like Bill Cosby. That's sorry, let's go on for an English accent, but they say that if an Egyptian army drowned in the Sea of Reeds as described, they said that there would be artifacts that we could discover and analyze. However, I disagree with all of those skeptics because it's obvious to me that the events of the Exodus took place as described, because if you read the Torah's account of how everything went down, and if you look at the dialogue of what the Jewish people tell Moshe, or I should say how the Jewish people constantly fetch at Moshe, and if you know a lot of Jews as I do, you know that you have heard Jewish people actually say the things that are being said verbatim in the Torah. I cannot think of another group of people that were literally enslaved, and then became free, but when they became free, they complained that the food was better during slavery. Like, do you understand how strange that is? Like, I understand, Moses, that I'm no longer forced to work all day in the hot sun. I get that I'm not being whipped anymore. I get that. I can do anything I want. But I'm telling you, the spread that they had at the Kiddush in the slave camp was great. This is literally from our Parsha. This is somebody complaining, quote, "They gave us pots full of meat. We ate as much bread as they wanted." These are the Jews complaining to Moshe. They said, "We would rather have our children be enslaved because the food was better there." And there's another Parsha. This is all in the Torah. I'm not exaggerating. There's a guy who starts naming every vegetable that they used to eat in Egypt. And you know he's Jewish because he reminds us that the food was at no cost. It literally says that. I will read to you if you think I'm making this up. This is from Numbers 11:5, actually in the Torah. Quote, "Remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost? Also, we had cucumbers and melons and leeks and onions." And he starts naming the food they had in slavery. And this is how I know the Torah must be true, because this is how Jews talk. Somebody wrote this dialogue down as it was being said. When I was an intern in Los Angeles, I was just a student at the time, but I got to intern at one of the synagogues in the San Fernando Valley that had a big Jewish Persian community. And on my first Shabbat there, it was the best Kiddush I've ever had because it was an enormous Persian bat mitzvah, and this girl's family had rolled out the red carpet, and that Kiddush was immaculate. It was, I still think about it. They had a challah the size of like a Toyota Corolla in the middle of the room, and they made, I didn't know you could do this, they made a chuppah for the food. So while you were getting stuff, you were under a chuppah. All sorts of Persian cuisine that was just beyond fantastic. They had 9 flavors of hummus. They had a falafel bar. For the kids, they had a build-your-own ice cream sundae bar. It had the works. And this was my first Shabbat there. And I thought, man, I can never go back to tuna and egg salad. Like, this is where... So I was watching everybody get their food, and there was an older guy, what you might call an alta cocker. He gets his bagel and cream cheese, and he comes back to my table, and he sits down in disgust. And he said, "They call this a Kiddush. They don't even have lox for their bagels." And all I could do was just laugh because they had rolled like an entire Persian supermarket for their Kiddush. And this guy was fetching because although they included the very not Persian bagels and cream cheese for him, they didn't even have lox. How could they? And then, I kid you not, this dude said, I would never pay for this. And another person at the table said, well, you didn't. This is how, that's right, enjoy, Mazel Tov. This is how you know the events of Exodus really happened, because no matter how many miracles God gives the Jewish people, there was stuff raining down from the Sea of Reeds parted. No matter how many times God saved them and fed them and freed them, there's always one guy saying, well, yeah, the food was better there, though. Right? Got to go back. What is the nature of complaining that our people find so appealing? In case you didn't know, the word kvetch in Yiddish, do you know what this means? The literal definition is to squeeze. That's what kvetch means, which is probably what Moshe wanted to do to the necks of the people, constantly complaining on it. Ugh. There's something about human nature that finds it necessary to talk about how bad things are and to compare it to how good and how much better things could be, or how much better things were. That's actually, there's an art to complaining, because you have to find someone willing to listen to you just kvetch. And those are hard to find. And usually when you find that person, you're like, I got to marry this person. They listen to me. And then if you can't find that person, you pay somebody that's a therapist, or you hire them to listen to you complain. This is someone's job, to listen. Now, as much as I'm joking about complaining, there is something very therapeutic about just venting something or even everything you're frustrated with. I think that's why people complain, or they yell at things that they know can't comment back at them. I was visiting my parents' house over the summer, and the lawnmower wouldn't start. So my father thought, well, obviously it needs to be yelled at. So he's giving the lawnmower a lecture while he's pulling the thing. My mom used to complain at the dog when it would dig in her garden, would just make it really bad. And many people, I think I've mentioned this, when I was an intern in LA, I would go to the Los Angeles Jewish Home for the Aging, which is a nursing home filled of old, cantankerous Jewish people. And they would put the television on for them to watch, but the people told me they couldn't put it on anything political because the old Jews would just livid at the television. And they'd go and shout and yell, and the TV doesn't talk back to you. So yes, while kvetching makes us feel better in the moment, certainly, does it really do anything? So I want to remind all of us that all of the Jews that God liberated from Egypt, all of the ones that complained and plotted against Moses, and even Moses himself who complained to God, all of the people that complained, we're told that they don't make it out of the desert. They die in the desert, and they personally never get to see the promised land. It's only their children who get to see the promised land. They're only them who are allowed this privilege. And this is a very powerful idea, and it's one I think we can apply to our lives as well. The more that we complain, the less likely it is that we'll ever cross into our own promised land. It's ourselves, our own emotions, our ego, our own kvetching that prevents us from making us truly happy. So remember Shelley, my aunt's dog. Well, she found her promised land. And although the grass really could have been better on the other side, that dog recognized that what she had was pretty darn good, because she saw how bad it could be and didn't want anything to do about it. And she wasn't even going to think about compromising that situation to what could be. Dear friends, I want to encourage us this evening to be like this dog. Content with what we have, knowing that maybe it's not, or maybe it's bad, but recognizing it could be a lot worse. I want to end this sermon with a quote from Rabbi Harold Kushner. He says, quote, "If you concentrate on finding whatever is good in every situation, you will discover that your life will suddenly be filled with gratitude, a feeling that nurtures the soul." So friends, my prayer for all of us is that we can attempt to find the good in every situation. And I pray, even if there's not lox at Kiddush tomorrow, Has v'shalom, I dare not joke about this, but even if there weren't a Kiddush tomorrow, that we can all still be grateful and we can all still enter our own promised land. Shabbat shalom. See, you guys like the dog sermon.